friends. This is the program Empire of Lies, where we discuss manipulation and disinformation in Russian media. Empire of Mirrors, how Russian television portrays a world without the US. Russian television is currently creating a parallel geopolitics, a world where the West produces nothing, Russia is technologically ahead, and the Middle East lives under the shadow of Moscow's moral superiority. In this episode of The Great Game, this narrative reaches its utmost clarity. The US is not needed by the world, Russia is self-sufficient, and any Western initiative is a sign of panic, stupidity, or sin. A World Without America. The program opens with a statement by former CIA officer Larry Johnson. The US has no leverage over Russia. They don't produce anything Russia needs. They don't even need a dollar. This quote, delivered on a Russian state program, becomes the fulcrum for the entire subsequent monologue. Russia is self-sufficient. The US is a parasite. The presenters then expand on the thesis. Thanks to sanctions and war, the country has made a technological breakthrough. Now it makes its own drones, motors and controllers, and hypersonic weapons have become standard weapons. This creates the myth of a closed-loop civilization, from farm cheese to nuclear torpedoes. Everything is ours, nothing is needed. This narrative is comforting and politically necessary. It helps explain why a country living in isolation considers itself a superpower. The rhetoric of inverted superiority. After the slogan, "We don't need anything," comes the second line, "They need us." Russia supposedly supplies America with uranium and titanium, without which the US cannot produce aircraft. This isn't just an economic argument, it's a form of emotional compensation. A world where Russia no longer has anything attractive to offer is transforming into a world where it becomes a source of vital elements. Here, the logic is mirrored. If Russia is truly dependent on Western technology, on air it is transformed into a country without which American industry would collapse. This is how a new faith is built, a faith in significance through inverse reflection. A superpower has imposed sanctions against us, but frankly, they're not all that impressive. Former CIA analyst Larry Johnson expressed an interesting thought. Let's hear what he had to say. The US has no leverage over Russia, none at all. The US doesn't produce anything Russia needs. They don't even need the US dollar. Russia would prefer to have good relations with the US and Europe, but they won't sacrifice their own security for that. Besides, Russia is now deploying all these impressive weapons systems. Last week, they showed us the Burevestnik and Poseidon, and last year they demonstrated the Oreshnik. Russia maintains a clear technological advantage over the US. We don't want to admit it, but that's the reality. And unfortunately, it appears the window of goodwill between Moscow and Washington has closed. From sanctions to messianism. The hosts then move on to military topics. Russia allegedly created weapons that the Americans haven't even touched. Burevestnik, Poseidon, Oreshnik. This is no longer about war, it's about mission. Nuclear symbols are transformed into signs of chosenness. The phrase, "there's nothing to expect from America," sounds like a national catechism. This isn't an analysis of international relations, but a declaration of faith in oneself and against others. Trump as a historical anecdote. The second part of the program is about Donald Trump, who allegedly admitted to orchestrating Israel's attack on Iran. The scene is presented with elements of comedy. The host compares Trump to the frog from Garshin's fairy tale, who, screaming, "I made this up," falls back into the swamp. Irony doesn't save the situation here. On the contrary, it cements the contrast. American politics is portrayed as childish, emotional, and driven by whims. Russia is portrayed as rational, reserved, and knowledgeable about how the world works. This theatrical maturity is an important element of the propaganda style. When you lack the power to change world events, you can compensate by pretending to be omnipresent. The Middle East in the Russian mirror. Toward the end of the program, the conversation shifts to Lebanon. Israel is presented as the aggressor, the US as the instigator, and Hezbollah as a force for self-defense. Here again, the main trope of Russian television emerges. Any Western operation is treated as a violation of humanitarian law, and any action against Moscow's allies is a crime. But this stems not so much from a concern for international law as from jealousy over the status of arbitrator. Moscow is no longer a mediator, it is a commentator, and its moral position is becoming its last resource of influence. The meaning of this rhetoric. Everything said in the program is subordinated to one goal: to affirm the image of Russia as the last sovereign entity on the planet. If the West produces nothing, if Trump is insane and Israel is criminal, then Russia remains the only rational force. This is not aggression, but a survival psychology. An empire that has lost its economic ties, political alliances, and cultural appeal is forced to create a world where its isolation is a virtue. Think, analyze, draw conclusions, and don't be fooled. This was the program Empire of Lies.